This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Welcome to the AIPIS show for accredited income property investment specialists and those who aspire to be. If you're a real estate, mortgage, or financial professional, this is the place for you. We'll explore innovative investment analysis, sales, marketing, and income-generating strategies for the most historically proven wealth creator, income property. Learn from the experts as they show you how to build a better business and a better life.
It's my pleasure to welcome a returning guest back to the show, and that is Lex Levinrad. He is the founder of the Distressed Real Estate Institute and best-selling author of several books, including Wholesaling Bank-Owned Properties, Learn How to Wholesale and Flip House. Lex has been a landlord for 15 years. He's got his own rental portfolio. He teaches people fix and flip techniques, and he also runs a real estate club. So it's great to have him on. He's got a wealth of knowledge. Lex, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you for having me, Jason.
It's good to have you, and it was great to learn when I moved to Florida that we are sort of neighbors. So it's good.
Exactly.
It's good to reconnect. Okay, so wholesaling, for the few people that don't know exactly what that means, it has a few different connotations out there. Explain what wholesaling is, and then let's talk about it in the context of bank-owned properties.
Okay. So basically the concept of wholesaling is getting a house under contract and wholesaling or flipping it to someone else for a profit. So you're not intending to actually keep it yourself. You're intending to wholesale it, and typically wholesalers will wholesale a property for an assignment fee. But with bank-owned properties, it gets a little trickier because you cannot assign them, so you have to do what's called a double closing.
And does the bank interfere with that's not a simultaneous double closing, I'm guessing, right? Because they probably wouldn't go for that either.
Well, it is a simultaneous double closing, but it has to be done. The title company is very tantamount because essentially they don't know that you're flipping the property. So there are certain restrictions, like, for example, in the case of a short sale, there could be a deed restriction, or in the case of Fannie Mae, you're not allowed to sell a property for more than 20% above what you purchased it for. But generally speaking, they just know that they're selling it to you. So if I've got a contract with a bank, they're selling it to me. They actually don't know that I'm flipping it to someone else. And in order to make the transaction kosher and legal, we actually have to pay for it. So it has to be a wet close. We have to sign the closing documents. We have to wire the money and own the property. And then on that same day, we turn around and sell it to someone else. Okay. And that's what makes the whole, transaction legal.
Right. So you do end up owning it for a few hours potentially. And I'm curious, have you ever had one of those not close on the other side? In other words, you ended up really owning it for longer than expected?
We've had some very interesting situations over the years. We had one closing where the individual signed everything, sent it to the title company. We thought we were good to go. We couldn't get hold of him. And 3-4 days went by, and then we got a call from his wife saying that he had triple bypass surgery. So we owned that one, and then he backed out and didn't buy it. So we had to find another buyer and line them up. And so we've had, like, a more usual situation will be where we're lining up a buyer on a Friday afternoon, and we're supposed to close on a Friday, but for whatever reason, traffic or bank wire cutoff times, and they don't fund it. So we land up owning the property for, maybe the weekend till Monday or till Tuesday. And it's always better when that doesn't happen, but It does happen sometimes. It's happened, I think, 3 times.
Just a small technicality question on that. I'm curious. Do you get an insurance policy on that property?
So here's the deal. That's a very interesting question. So basically what happens is that if we have a deal that looks like we're going to have to own it, then we make sure, typically when we're wholesaling, we don't really care too much about the property. But if we find a situation where we could be stuck with it, we actually go out to the property, look at it and say, hey, do we want to kill this deal and walk away from the profit, or are we willing to close on this? So if we like the house and we like the spread potential and would make a good fix and flip or whatever, then we'll get ready to close and we'll call our insurance agent and we will put a policy in place on it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. In deal flow, let's talk about that. Inventory is very scarce nowadays. How are you finding the properties? I mean, obviously the foreclosure rate is way down compared to Great Recession era or following Great Recession era. foreclosures where there was lots of foreclosure inventory. Are you struggling to find inventory nowadays?
Yes, well, it's changed a lot because we started our company, the Distressed Real Estate Institute, in 2008 at the height of the financial crisis. So we were coming out in 2009 at our first boot camp, and we were teaching people how to wholesale these properties and how to find inventory that was primarily REOs and short sales. So these were all bank-owned properties where people went into foreclosure, property went back to the bank, and the bank had so many properties coming in that they needed to dispose of them. And so it was a very efficient source of finding deals. But then as 2011, 12, 13, 14 were pretty good deals, but then it started drying up a little bit. So I'd say about a year and a half, 2 years ago, the inventory started rapidly depleting to the point where it got very, very difficult to find those sorts of deals. So we had to supplement with direct-to-seller, motivated seller marketing, sending out yellow letters and postcards and text marketing and a whole bunch of slew of new things to pick up the slack for the lack of inventory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you are getting some inventory and bringing those properties on board. So you don't see them at all then usually, it sounds like, right?
It depends on the property. Like this week, for example, we've got 2 properties that ironically both of our students got under contract, and both of them were from an online platform called Hubzoo. And so in this specific circumstance, both of them were looking for a hard money loan from me. So I actually drive out to look at the property to make sure that I feel comfortable with the property and doing the loan. But for the vast majority of the deals that we do, we're just turning them over without even seeing the property.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And so you're buying the property usually from the bank, well, always from the bank directly in this case, right? As we're talking about wholesaling bank-owned properties. Are you going to the auction? Are you strictly doing it on...
We don't go to the auction. We do bid on sites like auction.com and Zoom.com and Hubzoo. We also bid on HUD Home Store for HUD properties and on Fannie Mae's website, homepath.com for Fannie Mae properties, and on homesteps.com, which is Freddie Mac's website for bank-owned properties. But another key thing as well is short sales. As an example, just today I closed on a short sale where an individual owed like $320,000 on a property, and we're buying the property for $119,000. So in that specific situation, I'm actually keeping it as a rehab, and I'm not wholesaling at all. But the slew of inventory that I see that will be happening in the future is going to go back to short sales because as the market's moved up and up and up, I think that short sales will become a booming business again in the next couple of years.
And so that sounds like quite a reduction in loan balance. What's the actual market value of that property?
So the market value of that property fixed up. If I would have put it on the MLS, I could probably sell it for about 185, maybe 190. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so they had a big loan balance, and then they stayed in the property for I think 3 years without paying anything, and all the late payments and everything just accrued on to the point where they're horribly upside down, and the bank realizes that they're going to have to take a hit on it. And that specific property, interestingly, was it was put on the MLS, but it was put on the Orlando MLS, not our local MLS. So nobody who was local saw it. And one of my students saw it listed on Realtor.com and called the agent and went through the whole process of about 3 months of getting an offer accepted. And there were a lot of other bidders. They started at 100 and they kept going up until finally the bank accepted their 119 offer.
So you said fixed up, it would go for maybe 185. What does it go for in its current condition, do you think?
Well, I buy those that need work. In this case, you got a seller that's like 84 years old, and she's actually moving into assisted living facility. So the house has not been maintained, or it's a house from like 1980. So it really has not been maintained or updated for many, many years. So the roof is fine, but we're going to have to replace everything inside the house, probably spend about $25,000 or $30,000. So in its as-in condition, we're looking to buy them at around that price, at around $120,000, $125,000 max for a 3.2. And if we throw 25 or 30 into them and we sell them at 190, we should be able to turn about a $30,000 profit after commissions and fees and interests and everything else.
Fantastic. Well, I've asked you a bunch of questions. Maybe take us through the process a little bit, chronologically, Lex, if you would, on how someone does this. Of course, you've got the whole book about it, and there's always a lot more detail. Just give us kind of the overview of how that works, if you would. We danced around a little bit.
Sure. So basically, we do a lot of this actually in our training at our wholesaling boot camp, where we find that a lot of people that are beginners that want to learn how to flip houses, that don't really know how to do it, they don't realize how simple it really is, that you can actually just go to a website like hubzu.com. That's hubzu.com, and you can register as a bidder, and there's a whole thousands and tens of thousands of bank-owned properties, and anyone, even without a real estate license, can bid on a property. Now, if you were to win a bid, then they would send you a purchase contract, and then at that point in time, you would really have to either choose to keep it as a rental or to fix and flip it, or you'd have to wholesale it. So the concept of wholesaling it is pretty straightforward, because if you were in my market and you were one of my students and you said, hey, I got this house under contract and can I flip it to you, and I'd like to make $5,000 or $10,000, as long as the price to me made sense, I would be very happy to do that transaction. And you wouldn't have to come out of pocket any money at all, because we fund on the double closing, we fund the buy for our students, and we fund it for free. So we don't even charge them anything for that funding.
Fantastic. Okay, so going through that process chronologically, what more is there?
Okay, so basically, chronologically, the first step would be to go and register on one of these sites. Now, I do recommend, if somebody's serious about doing this and taking it to the next level, I do highly recommend that they consider getting their real estate license. And the reason I say that is because some of the REO sites that you can bid on will not allow you to place a bid if you don't have a real estate license. So as an example, on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and HUD's websites, you can only submit a bid if you are an agent. So you can search on them, but then if you find something that looks good and you'd like to bid on it, you have to submit that to an agent. Whereas if you are licensed yourself, you can do this, 2 o'clock in the morning if you want it on a computer, and you could be bidding on properties. Now, some of the other sites like Hubzu and Zome and auction.com do not require you to have a license, and anyone can register bid. But I think the real key thing is for somebody to understand what wholesaling is and why wholesaling exists.
Mm-hmm. Okay, before you go into that, though, we should probably say, though, that there can be some disadvantages to having that license, too, in other areas of the investing world, right?
There could be, I was many years when I wholesaled, I didn't have a license, and the guys that trained me recommended not to have a license. And yes, they are, because having a license, of course, subjects you to the regulations and rules of your local real estate commission. Greater
liability, potentially. And also Correct. It could put a red flag up, because you have to disclose it to the seller that, hey, you're a pro. Listen, a lot of licensees aren't pros at all, but we know. But the public might think that, and they might think, they put their guard up, right? So
exactly.
It can work both ways. Okay, go ahead with what you were saying.
All right, so basically understanding the concept of wholesaling is that there's investors out there. So let's say a professional investor like myself or you, and they're looking for a deal. So let's say I'm looking for a 3-2, I can buy, fix, and flip and make $30,000. So now the thing is that I can't be everywhere. I can't be bidding on all these sites. I'm just one individual. So if I could have other people going out there and looking for these, they might be able to bid on something that looks like it'd be a good candidate for me. So really the only thing that they need to understand is like, hey, there are investors out there, no matter what city and state you're in, there are investors out there that are looking for certain parameters of a deal. So if I'm looking for a 3-2 and I'm willing to pay up to $125,000, then if you can find that 3-2 for less than $125,000, let's say for $110,000, you can then flip it to me and you can make that difference, that profit. And so this exists. This is a phenomena that exists all over the country in any city and state, because guys that are actually rehabbing houses for a living, their biggest problem is getting more inventory, finding houses that make sense. So that's why wholesaling is very efficient and creates an efficiency in the market, because it allows people who have time to sit on these sites and bid on them and get houses under contract, and then make money assigning or double closing these houses to other people who don't have the time and are just looking for a steady slew of deals.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
So basically that's one, is the double closing and the assigning. So I think really the main point for people to understand is that if you were to meet an individual homeowner, let's say you mailed a postcard or you mailed a yellow letter, or even if your next door neighbor wanted to sell their house, right? If it was a damaged house for whatever reason and you could buy it at a discount, you would be able to sell that house to someone by just simply assigning the contract. But for bank-owned properties and short sales, or any property where there's an entity or a bank or a government entity that owns a property, you have to double close. So double closing really is just dependent on having a good title company that understands the process, that understands what you're doing, and that makes it, a seamless transaction.
Fantastic. Lex, you alluded to that you thought the short sale business was going to expand in the coming years. Certainly we all know a recession is coming eventually. We don't know when, nobody does. I'd love to hear your outlook on the market, the economy, anything you want to share there, and I think the listeners would enjoy it too.
Sure, absolutely. And I've listened to your show quite extensively, and I see some of the commentary that you've had with economic policy, et cetera, is very, very interesting. So I know you're definitely a scholar of that, and you read up on that quite a bit. But my thoughts taken with a grain of salt, I think that there's a dichotomy in the market. On the one hand, we've got this booming stock market, this booming real estate market, and everybody's making a lot of money. But on the other hand, there's a subset of the market, like as an example, people maybe who worked in retail who are now out of a job because the job at the mall closed for them, that are suffering. And so I think that there's always going to be a subsector of the market where people cannot pay their mortgage and are behind on their payments, and that property is going to go into foreclosure. So when I look at foreclosure rates, one of the key things for me to look at is to see if there's any trend there. And I'm seeing a rise in foreclosure rates. And the fact that we just closed on a short sale today, and that's the first short sale literally in probably 6 months, it indicates to me that there are people out there like this that are struggling to pay their mortgage. So I think that as time goes by, we're going to see more of that. We're going to see more people that are potentially upside down and are not able, to pay their mortgage.
Yeah, the next crisis, though, the banks coming out of the Great Recession, they've been pretty conservative. I don't know if you agree with that. I think they've been conservative.
No, I definitely agree.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of people sitting in houses now that are really, troubled. Now, there are other areas that are definitely of concern: student loans, car loans, general credit. Certainly the economic boom has been uneven for sure. And, you could easily argue that inequality is growing and the middle class is shrinking. So there's a lot to be concerned about. Medical debt, that's another one. So, it's sort of a little harder to determine. Like in the early 2000s, I predicted the mortgage crisis, and I look back on that and remember all my arguments with realtors who said it was going to keep going forever. I told them they were crazy. And, it was sort of easy to do because you knew that there were 5/1 arms out there. You could look at the biggest time in the pipe when the most of those were originated and just do a lag of 3 to 5 years. And you could see, hey, they're going to adjust. People are going to go into payment shock. And Lex, what I didn't know, though, is, of course, what Wall Street was doing behind the scenes. Right. I knew the banks were being too liberal and stupid, but I had no idea about phase 2 with the way they were doing the securitization and all those scams. That was a whole new world to me, and we all learned about in The Big Short.
Yeah, fantastic movie. Love that movie.
And you know what else is great? Margin Call. That's another really good one. Did you see that?
I did. And did you see Too Big to Fail?
I can't remember if I saw
about
that
the Federal
one.
Reserve. Basically, it's very interesting. It's like basically the chairman of the Fed basically brought in the CEOs of the 10 largest banks, and it's like, look, you guys are doing this bailout, or we're shutting you down. It's a very interesting movie.
Yeah, I think I did see that one. And there's one more, since we're talking about movies, I got to recommend. You probably saw this one. It's called 99 Houses, and it took place in Orlando. We're both in Florida, so that's really prescient because those streets just look totally familiar to me. And, it's about this bigwig realtor and his Range Rover and, all the people he's interacting with that are in foreclosure. It's really, I shouldn't be giggling, but it's sort of funny to look back on almost, but definitely a terrible time for sure. So, anyway, the point is, what's going to happen? When's it going to happen? That's what we all want to know, right? And
but I think I like to just focus on because we can't predict the future, right?
Yeah,
so all we can do is deal with the present. So for the present, I just took a property that cost me $102,000, put $15,000 into it, rented it for $1,300 a month. I went to the bank. I got a loan for 3.25% on a 15-year mortgage.
Isn't that incredible?
$700 payment with a $1,300. And you know what? 15 years from now, it's free and clear. And if real estate goes up at just 4.8% per year, that house will be worth double its value in 15 years. And I think that's like really the big thing of creating wealth. You know, like for those people out there that are flipping, it's awesome. And I wholesale and I fix and flip, but just remember to keep a couple of rentals along the way too, because that's really a surefire way to create a more secure future and a better retirement. And you know, at the end of the day, right now, the way things are going, if we stay with this economy and if we stay with these low rates, we could be booming like this for 4 years, 5 years, or more. So I think a lot of it really swings on the upcoming election.
So, yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and it'll be very interesting to see how it all plays out. But no question, buy and hold properties, very, very good thing, very good thing. Lex, what else do you want people to know just as we wrap it up here? Anything maybe I haven't asked you?
Well, I mean, I just think that, you know, I see a lot of people that are out there that struggle. They go to work every day. They got a paycheck. They're living kind of paycheck to paycheck. They haven't saved up enough. Maybe they've got a 401k at work, but they don't really have a whole bunch going on other than that. And I would just, you know, like to say that, you know, you're in an environment right now where you got the lowest interest rates we've ever had. And while you can still buy a rental property at a price that makes sense, that will cash flow, you should think about doing it. And if you have some spare time, learn how to wholesale, learn how to go and register on these websites, learn how to bid on properties. And if you find a good deal, you can always keep it as a rental. You can fix and flip it, or you can wholesale it to an investor out there, anyone like me or whatever city and state you're in, somebody who's looking for a good deal. The deals are out there.
Very good. Very well said. Give out your website.
Okay, so my website is lexlevinrad.com. That's LEXLEVINRAD.com. And I've got some more info on there. And I've also got the Wholesaling Bank Home Properties book that we were talking about available as a download right off that website.
Fantastic. Lex, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Jason.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.